17 hands. That one wasn't but 15 hands. And I took him and put him on the scales at the co-op. He weighed 1250. I mean, not at the co-op, but Stewart Brothers back there. In other words, he weighed on the scales at 1250. But that joker was just as solid as a rock when you touched him and all. And the boy that got him, they went riding him the first week. I've talked to him over the internet. They are tickled to death with him. But I had lost my temper with that mule, and I lost his trust. And me and that mule never did gain it back. And that's the reason when you do that with a mule, you just as well to move him on to somebody else, and they might do something with him. Now, I had a big one at the house one time. Somebody had him hooked to a wagon and the car run into him, and the deal, it killed his teammate, and he about got his tongue cut off. And they sewed it back, and it had grew back, but they say they didn't think he had feeling in it and all. They had told me honestly what had happened to him. But now, when I first took him to the house and started working with him, you could walk up and lay your hand on him like that, that joker is gone. He was just scared to death of anything. And I got started, you could rub him real lightly and then just gradually get hit. Now, once you rubbed him and he felt you rubbed him, then you could sit there and slap on him and all. But you walk off from him and it was just the same thing again. And I kept him there close to a month. And I didn't even try to hook him up and work him or nothing. I just worked with him. But by the end of that month, he had started trusting me. And then the guy backed out. He was so proud of him. He backed out, decided to keep him and try him again. I told him, I said, the first thing to do is don't take him home and try to hook him up. I said, spend some time working with him every day, rubbing on him. Become his friend. And he did, and he wound up. In other words, the feller, he was just tickled to death with the mule. But that mule had to build his trust in people back. And people ain't what happened to him, but he associated it with it. That old stud horse I'm talking about I had wasn't scared of nothing, I don't reckon. But you know, there's an aluminum gate down there by the road that joker shy from every time, like it was going to just eat him up. He'd go to the other side of the road before he'd go back. And I never did know what happened there, but it's something he associated with that gate.
Those kind of look like vaults there, don't they? What are those?
No, that ain't vaults, not that big. It may be septic tanks.
Septic tanks?
And then that don't look like septic tanks either, really. If that's vaults, it's for stacking them on top of one another. Because it looks like there's two of them side by side.
Yeah.
Now, they say in places they're doing that. Stacking bodies on top of one another.
I think in New Orleans they have to bury them above ground, don't they? Because there's the water.
Well, it's a problem with them floating, yeah. And I don't know if it's everybody is buried. They do a lot of mausoleums down there.
What's
That's always been a stupid thing to me. I understand at the time that New Orleans was built, you know, the water for travel and all was very important. But the government spending that kind of money to build back a town that's below sea level is stupid.
What's the funniest thing that's ever happened to you digging a grave?
One of two things. Okay. One I told you about the other day when the strap broke again. And I'd say that probably is number one. But number two would be, I don't know, I hadn't been working there but about a year, and Chris Cotton went to help me. And Chris Cotton's about 7 foot tall and about as big around as my arm.
Okay.
But he was right out of high school. And he had worked some of Randy and them before. He knew them all. You know Alan Cotton, the floors?
Yeah.
That's his son.
Okay.
But anyway, we done a contract funeral over in Shavertown, which is in the quarters. It was a black funeral for a funeral home out of Enterprise. And supposedly the woman that we was burying, her mama gave the land for that cemetery. But the grave was on the back side back there, right next to the woods. But when I dug that one, and at this time all we had was a little green backhoe. And when I dug it, there was a lot of roots and all in it. So, you know, I wasn't paying that much attention to anything. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the black funeral homes. They generally have a week to prepare. But it was just before Christmas, and they'd had the Christmas parade on Thursday night in Andalusia. And there was old Black Boy riding the gray stud horse in that parade. And that joker was jumping and cutting up and all. I'd have killed that horse electrically in that there in the street, I believe. But anyway, we made it through the parade. Well, this was on Saturday evening that we done the funeral. Actually, two funny things happened. I dug it on Friday evening, and me and Chris went Saturday morning and set it up. We was just fixing to put the chair covers on. That funeral was supposed to be at dinner time in Enterprise. And around 3 before they're supposed to be there. We looked up, here comes a funeral coming down the road, and we didn't have the chair covers. You ain't never seen two fellas put chair covers on that quick.
Yeah.
That funeral went right on by and went on down the road to that church that was on down the road. but that wasn't the funny part now. You got to remember about the horse I told you about.
Yeah, okay.
Well, they ain't in the driveway in this old cemetery. There's a lot of suck-in places where people was buried without vaults and all. And we didn't have no idea how big a crowd was coming or what.
Yeah.
And so I told Chris, I said, let's just take the trailer back to the funeral home. When it's over, we'll take everything down and load it on the truck and all, and get the vault lid on. And if you'll be scooping the dirt on it, I will go get the trailer and come back. So, well, by the time they got there, with their funeral being in Enterprise that time of year, it wasn't a long ways from dark when we got through. But anyway, we got the tent and all down and got the vault lid on. And what you do, on that tractor, you'd put about 2 scoops of dirt on the lid and then take your scoop and rake it in around the sides of the vault and pack it. And Chris knew how to do all that. Well, I took off to go get the trailer. Well, as I was coming out of the cemetery on the truck, I met a black boy riding a horse that I was pretty sure was that same horse, and I stopped to talk to him a minute. And I asked him, I said, ain't that horse that was in the parade the other day? And he said, yeah. I said, was that you riding him? He said, no, that was so-and-so. He called him by name and all. But I told him, I said, well, he acts like he's doing a lot better today. And he said, yeah, that boy don't know nothing about riding no horse or something or other. Well, I got in the truck and went on, but see, that's kind of over the hill from where Chris was. He was on the backside of the cemetery. Well, I went and got in the trailer. I mean, I left there. I don't know if you know where Shavertown is. I left there and went to the funeral home, come right back. Chris is sitting over there white as a sheet and didn't have the grave cover. And I pulled up there and I said, what's wrong? He says, look right over here at what I found. I reckon we dug into an old grave, and it was top of a skull about that big around that he had found when he dumped that dirt on there and went to scooping it in. He found it. And I told him, I said, Christopher, I said, Chris, all I know to do is just put it in the hole and cover it back up. He said, well, that's kind of what I had thought. He said, but when I started, he said, I come over here and sat down and I started thinking. And that's kind of what I decided. Just put it back in the grave and go ahead and cover it. He says, and when I got up to walk over there to my tractor, he said, here come a horse running through the cemetery. Saddle, bridle, and all. Now, let me point out, it was getting right at dark. And he was out there by himself, and I found out he wasn't crazy about being in the cemetery by himself to start with. But he said that horse actually jumped into that hole there. And he said, all I could think of was a headless horseman. He was 17 at the time, I think. Might have been 18, but I'm thinking he was 17, but he had just graduated.
So what did y'all do?
Well, Chris said, man, when that happened, he said, I know what. He said, but in a couple of minutes, he said, I was trying to figure out how to get anywhere. Because, see, I left him there without a way of going or anything.
Anywhere but there, huh?
Yeah. He said, I ain't never been so proud to see a nigger come running through here hunting a horse in my life. I still tease Chris about that. But anyway, I'll tell you, at that time, they paid him $50 a grave to help me, and it wasn't covering it, you know. And he was already thinking, but that one wound him up. He never did come back and help do another grave. But I would